Hello again there, Racetrack Builder fans. Okay, in this video I'm going to show you all about string objects. Ooh, spooky. They're not. Um, Really, all a string object is a series of ordinary objects um, placed in a particular order, and it has the ability to follow splines or align itself to the side of the track, things like that. But essentially, all string objects is a few objects that you've loaded in and then you've told them to be in a group together. So I'll quickly show you what I mean with just a quick example, and I'll talk you through a few things, and then I'll show you what we're working with as an example. So you just add, and it'll add a new string object. So we should call this bleh. Doesn't matter, we're not going to use it. Again, like your objects where you had your group, which was the category selection in Racetrack Builder for which group of objects you wanted to use. You also have the same here, because when you go to the string objects list, you can have different sorts of string objects. Right, I didn't actually click save, so it didn't remember that. And we shall call it blip, just because we can. And then save. Right, so that's created just a basic string object. Now, you have essentially three parts: the start, the pattern, and the end. The one that you will usually be using is the pattern, but the start and the end do come in useful as well. The pattern is the bit that repeats. So, say for example, you had a rumble strip with three colours: white, red, blue, and you want it to repeat white, red, blue, white, red, blue, white, red, blue, all the way along the thing. You would add, and then choose what you wanted. Oh, you would add the three different parts into there, and then when you use that string object, it would keep repeating those three parts because it's in the pattern. What the start and the end are for are you can specify one or more objects to appear at the start, and you can assign one or more objects to appear at the end. So another example of a rumble strip, you've got three colours, again, white, red and blue. At the start, you might always want the start and the end of every rumble strip to have three red squares, and then then everything in the middle is repeating between white, red, blue, white, red, blue. So what you would do is on the start you would add three red curbstones. At the end you would add three red curbstones, and then in the middle you would add one white, one red and one blue. And then whenever you draw a string object, it will always start with three reds and end with three reds, but in between will be the repeating pattern of however many objects you selected. Now that sounds a little complicated, but that was just a brief explanation. I'll come back and we'll go through all of this properly in a moment. Just want to show you what we're going to be working with first. So for the moment, because we don't need this, I'm going to delete it. Right, back over to my 3D application, Lightwave. So I'm going to be working with four different objects, and the reason I've chose four is because we will have to treat all of them slightly differently because they do different jobs. So this is just a standard concrete block, like a concrete bollard. You might want these to go across the corner of an intersection. Say you've got like a road coming down there and a road here. You might want to block off that area by putting a nice curved row of concrete blocks. So you can, just using just that one object. So that's going to be the first example, making a string object using just one, just using one item. Then we've got a fence. It's just a fence panel. Now I'm going to show you this one because this is again just a single object, but this one is acting as a wall. With these concrete blocks, when you have the next concrete block next to it, it won't be touching. You'll want a small gap in between them. But with the fence, you want that edge of the new piece to touch that edge of this piece, so you get a continuous fence. Excuse me. So we're going to have to use a space on this one to tell it to put a small gap in between each concrete block. On this one we're not, and I'm going to show you a current bug that's in Racetrack Builder using this object. The next object we're going to be playing with is a curb, a rumble strip, and the last piece is a brick wall. And it's no ordinary brick wall, and I shall explain why. The curb, we're going to use that one because it's a multi-part object. That's not one complete thing. It's made up of a white one, a red one, another white one, and a blue one. Now the reason I've got two white ones is because they are actually slightly different. If you have a look, that one and that one, it has got a different bit of texture on it. So I want to keep both of them, so at least it puts a bit of variation in the texture. And then the walls. Now you could just build one simple segment of wall like that. But the problem is you would have to put, or you would have to make sure that they had ends on them. Otherwise, if you see them from the wrong angle, you've got a hole. But the problem is, if you have a polygon there and you have another wall joining next to it, you will actually see a very slight seam where the two items join, just purely because that side polygon is there. So what we're actually doing is we've got the first piece of the wall has got an end polygon on the left side. The second piece of wall hasn't. So this will be our repeater. Part 1 will be our start object in the string object. Part 2 will be the pattern, the one that keeps getting repeated. And part 3 will be the end piece, because that's got a end polygon on the right hand side. So what we would do in the string object, we'd say part 1 is start, part 2 is the pattern, and part 3 is the end. And that means that whenever we draw a wall, it will always have a solid end on both ends. Both ends of the wall will be solid, you can't see through them. So that is quite handy. But another thing you can use, it's kind of similar to this, but another way you can use the start and end pieces, say you have a metal guardrail. Now you could have the guardrail just end abruptly. So it's at the normal height and it just suddenly starts and then it suddenly stops somewhere else. Or what you could do is have that as your section of guardrail and then build another section of guardrail here, but maybe taper it down, and then build another one on this side, tapers down that way, and you have this one as your start object, the main piece of guardrail as your pattern, and this sloped piece of guardrail as your end. And that means that whenever you draw a guardrail as a string object, it'll always sort of taper up a little bit to the normal height, then you'll have your guardrail, and then it'll taper back out again at the end. So it's just a way you can sort of put a start and an end cap on an object. So it's quite a useful trick to use, and so that's what we're going to do. So, as I says, oh yeah, so in the case of this wall, it's three different parts. Yeah, there's one, there's another, and you got the one in between. You need to export each one of these parts as a separate object. So with this object, I will actually save 3 files. The left one, the middle one, and the right one. In the case of the curb, there's 4 pieces. So I've had to save 1, 2, 3, 4 FBXs. And I think I can show you that it's on the other screen, but I'll just move it over. So yeah, here we go. We've got the curb, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and the wall is 3 pieces. So I'll move that back out the way. Right. So all you just export these exactly the same as you export a normal object. They are normal objects. It's just there's 4 of them. So export them, and then in Xpacker, just load them in one at a time and treat them exactly the same as you did before. Yeah, here's the rumble strip. So I loaded the 4 parts, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I've used sensible names. So it's white, red, white, blue, so I know what they are. And I've done all the normal properties because, like I said, at the moment these are just normal objects. But yeah, load them all in, fix your materials and your textures if you need to, as you would normally. And then once you've got all 4 parts in, or however many parts you're using, then you can create a string object. So we will. I'll start with the basics first of all though. Like I said before, we'll start with the concrete block. So we shall call this barrier block, and this will be in a group of barriers. Okay, so this is just a single object, so we'll click on pattern, we'll click add, now we're just going to find it, block. I was lucky. I don't know why it keeps doing that. Okay, so there's the block. I'll click save again just to be safe. You nearly always want curve with spline. That allows it to go round corners, essentially, or you can sort of draw a wiggly line as an approximation of the road next to it, and then you can align the points to the side of the road. But curve with line allows that. Stretch allows parts of the object to stretch slightly if it needs to make it fit. If it doesn't, say for example you've got a piece of wall that is 10 meters wide, and the distance that you want to draw the string object is 40 meters. That's fine. You'll get 4 pieces of wall, and it'll fit exactly into the gap. But what happens if the gap is 45 meters? It's going to fall just slightly short, or it's going to have to do an extra piece and overshoot the distance vastly. So I presume, I've not actually used it yet, but I presume if you tick the can stretch, it allows that to stretch all the parts very slightly to allow for that gap. Scale means you can adjust the scaling for certain parts. So if you wanted, say for example you built something at 1 meter, a piece of wall 1 meter high, 1 meter wide, and you suddenly realise you need the wall to be 2 meters tall. You can change the scale to be 200 and it'll double the size. Rotate, you can set the initial rotation. What this is handy for is, say for example, well, with a single item it's not too bad. Like for example that concrete block, if you model something like that and you modeled it in the wrong axis, say for example you modeled it left to right rather than front to back, when you load it in as a single object it would be fine because it would just be pointing the other way and you can rotate it round within Racetrack Builder. But if it's a string object, it's gonna look like it's put in lots of these concrete blocks side by side rather than end to end. And if that's the case, then you just switch back to Xpacker, and on your block you just set yes rotate and rotate it around one of the 3 axes to face whichever direction it needs to be. And then as a single object it'll face whatever direction it was modelled in, but in the string object it will face the new direction that you tell it to face. Offset, again, if you need to move one of the parts just slightly in one of the directions, or actually quite a lot, I presume these are in meters, then you can use an offset. Space before and after. So now we're going to need this for the block because I said we're going to have a little gap in between. So we will use this, and I will say if this is meters, I want 0.125 and 125. Okay, that's close enough. So that should put in about a 25 centimeter gap in between each concrete block. Now, the concrete block is 2 meters long. So that is a very basic string object. I'll just save that. Oh yes, as with normal objects, like you got your drivable and does it collide and does it receive shadows, you do have the same properties for string objects. So you have, is it drivable? No, it's not. In our case, no, it's not drivable. It would be collidable, but we haven't got a collision object at the moment, so that doesn't really do much good. Is it movable? So it's like if it was a string of cones and you ploughed into the cones, could you knock them about? Because you can do that with single objects as well. And the rest of these, they are exactly the same options as for a standard object. So that is a very basic string object using just one object to block. Now we will add a new string object. We will call this one fence. Okay. Oh, sorry. Just another thing I forgot. Grounding. How do the vertices of the object follow the terrain? You know, object sits on spline, object lowered to ground, object lowered and tilted to ground, object vertices to ground, object or vertices lowered to ground, weighted. To be honest, I don't know what most of those do. The only one I've actually tried is object sits on spline, and that seemed to work fine for most objects that I tried. So it's like if you get a couple of cones, you set it to object sits on spline, you paint them along, and then you make that spline match the curve of the road. It matches the curve of the road perfectly fine, and they follow the terrain as well. So that seems to work perfectly fine. But most of the others that I've seen in the other X packs use vertices lower to ground. So we can use that. If it's good enough for the default settings, it's good enough for me. That's not very good practice. Anyway, so now the fence. On pattern, we will add fence. Oh, yes, because we put a gap in that one. That's good. Fence. We want curve with spline. Save that. Vertices lower to ground. Have that. So that's the fence. Now this one, like I said, it's pretty much the same as the block. It's just an individual part. But this one we're not using spacing on. Plus, this fence is going to throw up a problem when we get to Racetrack Builder. I know it will, because I've confirmed it with Brendan that it's a bug. Right. So next string object, and it's barrier wall. Okay, so there we go. The repeating part. There we go. So the repeating part will be part 2. Start on part 1, and the end on part 3. Okay, so curve with spline, curve with spline, curve with spline. If you have several objects, you can just click on that one and then set curve to spline and things like that. But if you have several objects inside the pattern or in the start, I believe you can just click either pattern or start and set the properties, and it'll set them for everything that's within that little section. Right, so we'll save that. Oh, that didn't have a group. Spelt badly. Barriers. Just click that just so it updates. We save it. Okay, and the last one we will do rumble curve. Excuse me, just scratching myself. And we'll call this, there are some already. There's rumble strip, But I want this to appear in its own category. Okay. Right. Now, for the pattern, yeah, I hate that. Tab number 1, tab number 2, 3, 4. Okay, curve with spline. Yes, I was correct. If you click that part, it will set it for all of them. So, yes, we do want curve with spline and vertices lowered to ground. Okay. Now, if we wanted, we could make this start and end always with a particular colour, if we really wanted to. I'm not going to, but we could. We don't need to. We've already got an example that uses a start and an end. I just hope I've got the rotation the right way around, otherwise it's going to look a bit strange. Excuse me. Right, so we will zip this to, yes, we've got all 4. That's fine. 4, hence, okay. I just hope we've got the rotation set right, otherwise I'll just have to nip back to this. Right, so close that. Might as well close that as well. Open racetrack builder. Okay. So now let's check to see if our objects have actually worked. So string objects. Have we? Oh, hang on. New test. Still I think it's still using some of the stuff from the old version of the XPack. So this should, yes. So we'll load the new XPack. Barriers and rumble, which are ours. So concrete block. Oh, first I'll add a road, just so we've got something we can assign. Oh, it's a bit closer than I thought. Okay. So that will give us something to work with, to say the least. Okay, so we'll start with the concrete block. Ooh. Seems like I got it right. Oh, and there we go. The spacing's working as well. What I'll do, I'll delete that one. Make a new one. No, wrong one. Freehand draw, that's better. Okay, that will do. So if we align that to the track, perhaps. There we go. Fixes the issue. There just wasn't enough points in the track to be able to align it properly. Now there is. So there we go. So that's the barrier. The spacing works okay. And now I shall completely delete that. What was next on the agenda? Oh yes, fence. And there's a chance I might get this the wrong way round. Let's have a look. Yes, I have. Okay. So if we go the other way, string object, and there we go. Another reason why this isn't mapping, aligning tremendously well, is because this road is actually quite small. The squares are... Oh, no, it's not too bad. Each one of those squares, one strip, is a metre wide and 2 metres tall. But anyway, right, so we shall align that one to the road, like that. And then I'm going to switch down to here. Now, okay, so that's facing the right way, but there's no transparency. This is the bug that I mentioned earlier, and Brendan is aware of it, and he's in the middle of fixing it right now. He expects an update which takes care of this problem to be out within a few days. So you're perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with the XPack. There's nothing wrong with the object. It's the program itself is playing up a little bit. For some reason, it doesn't display transparency maps on string objects. It displays transparency maps on normal individual objects like trees and things like that. They all work perfectly fine. But if it's a string object, transparency map is just a no-go at the moment. But you can still make your XPack with the objects and not worry, because it won't be the XPack that's broken. Like I said, it's the program. So you can make the XPack and load it in and it looks like this, and then, for example, tomorrow he releases the new update, you install it, and next time you load this, the transparency map will automatically be working, or it should be. if he fixes it. But yeah, so don't worry too much about not seeing the transparency map. It will turn up once the fix has been done. Right, anyway, so that's the fence that has no gaps in between it, but it follows around the curve quite nicely. And it also shows you the problem that I was talking about. And now I shall delete that. Oh, there we go. Now on to the next one, which is the wall. Now this one, remember, I said it's got a start and an end piece. So hopefully when we draw it, we should have a start and an end piece. We'll soon find out. Let's align that. And there we go. This end has an end cap on it. And this end also has an end cap on it. Now, you might notice there's a weird little step between each one of them. Now, I would surmise that that is in the string object settings. You've got the different ways it can rest on the ground. I'd imagine we've got the wrong setting for this type of object. I'd expect that's what's wrong, because it looks like it's just a problem with the way it's sitting on the ground. That's the setting that would control that. So if you find that it's doing steps like this, try changing it to follow spline or object rests on ground, rather, because at the moment this one was set to vertices rests on ground. So choosing one of the others might fix that. I'd expect it would. Okay, and the last one, which isn't in this set, it's in Rumble. There's only one. And we will do a string object, and we will start here. And I will do. We'll throw in a couple more, just to help it even out a bit. And then we'll click on one, and we'll get quite close so we can see properly. There you go. Now for some reason the rumble strip took a little spaz there. That's probably more to do with the way, perhaps it's something to do with that corner. Let's have a look. Yes, more than likely. Move that one to there. still behaving slightly naughty, but we can always move it manually if need be. But yeah, so that's just a very basic of how to get everything in there. You know, what you actually do with it and how creative you get is entirely up to you. But that should be all the tools you need to get a string object working. As it says, if it's multi-parts, remember to export each part separately and then load them in as regular objects, and then in Xpacker you can create a new string object and then assign those parts into it. So there we go. Oh, get rid of that. Don't need that. Wrong mouse button. Go. I have no intention of saving that. So there you go. Have fun. Go and make string objects. Bye.